Welcome to the Environmental Transformation Podcast. I'm your host, Sean Grady, and today's guest is Nikos Avlonas. He is the director and the president, CEO of the Center for Sustainability and Excellence. Welcome to the show, Nikos.
Thank you so much, Sean, for having me in this show. I'm so
Well,
excited.
I am really excited to have you back as you are one of our repeat guests. And this is exciting because, this is an important topic. And you being one of the resident experts in the industry, who better to come and talk about ESG?
Thank you so much for your kind words. ESG is a very complex issue. It took me 15 years in order to understand better what's happening and is evolving every single day.
Absolutely. I mean, it's been the hot topic in the industry for the past 2.5, 3 years, and more so lately. But what I'd like to do with this episode is kind of break this interview into like three segments. That way, the listeners can, take away bite-sized chunks of the interview, so that they can break this down into more understanding, and we can really get into some details to cover some topics. So the first topic I'd like to talk about is let's introduce the listeners to the Center for Sustainability and Excellence and talk a little bit about your history, and then let's talk about ESG and what this all means. So give us a little bit of background about uh, CSE and how you got started.
Yeah, we get started 15 years ago in Europe. We were the first company which we started a new sector, which was sustainability consulting and training services. At that time, there was no one in our sector. We were the only one, and
Mm-hmm.
was very proud about that, starting a whole sector. Today, it's a $35 billion sector,
Mm-hmm.
so it has grown a lot. CSE it was always a thought leader and pioneering in its ESG consulting services, but also was a training company, was trying to certify and qualify sustainability professionals all around the globe. So
Mm-hmm.
while we started in Europe, immediately after that, we moved on to Chicago, where we established our global headquarters. And now we have activities in North America, Europe, Gulf countries, and Asia, more or less. We work with Fortune 500 firms, private institutes, governmental agencies, and sometimes with smaller firms. And we have trained over 95% of Fortune 500 firms in 90 countries.
Wow. Wow. So you guys are obviously one of the original sustainability practitioners and education leaders in the industry. And it's really great to see that, you've kind of been able to bring your business to the forefront with this type of a service, because as you know, and everyone else knows right now that's listening, ESG is the topic of, top of everybody's mind as it relates to the industry. Sustainability and everything else is so much involved with this. And let's do this. Can you explain to listeners the meaning of, environmental social governance, and why is it such a big deal in the industry today?
Yeah, I'm gonna do my best. It's a complicated. It's more complicated than it seems. As we all know, ESG is the new buzzword. It's the new hot topic in sustainability, and it's about what the investors require from business. So the investors require from business, from their investments, to meet particular environmental, social, and governance criteria in order for investors to reduce their investing risks. So investors want more sustainable business in order to protect their investments, and business also wants to be more sustainable, and that's why in between we have the ESG criteria.
Mm,
While ESG criteria seems very simple, in reality it's not. We're
right.
talking about over 100 criteria about the environment, social factors like diversity, equal rights, supply chain issues, and governance issues. So it's not easy. They're really demanding criteria. And of course, the business are trying to meet this criteria, and it's not easy for them.
Yeah, so investors have been changing their mindset on what's important to them. No longer is just you know profitability the big item, or the main thing. Right now, it's investors are really looking at how are companies really doing in the environmental space from addressing, climate change and their risk.
Yeah.
And I think this is a shift in the mindset of investors.
Yeah, exactly. For investors, it's about doing well by doing good. And this
That's
is
a
this is
good way to
this is
put
this
it.
is this is this is a great thing. Let me give you some impressive figures right now. So in 2022, it is expected to have sustainability related assets under management in about $35 trillion. By
Mm,
2025, we're going to move on to $50 trillion in sustainability related assets. And actually, according to Bloomberg, one out of the $3 today, which are invested in with ESG criteria,
hmm.
which means that the whole world, one third of the globe, are
Right.
now have to meet particular ESG criteria if they want to survive, if they want to see the future positively, if they want to sustain themselves.
Right, right. And if they want that investment money to kind of help
Yeah.
continue growing their companies, I mean, companies need to start doing, managing their business in a more sustainable way to actually grow instead of just making profits.
Yes. And one more thing, which I think is going to be very interesting for the audience, is that the rating, we have independent rating institutes such as the MSCI, CDP, Dow Jones Sustainability Index, and Sustainalytics. I'm just referring to some independent rating agencies that their job is to rate independently the ESG performance of business.
Uh-huh.
And the interesting thing is that while the rating agencies they doing that, the business have no control of his rating.
Right, right. Well, that's so when we talk about these new ratings and the whole requirement of reporting and things like that, which is we're going to get into it in a couple of these other segments. So let's save some of those questions. But what is the value of ESG reporting for companies? Because both internally and external benefits. Let's dive into that a bit because I think that's going to kind of shed light on why this is so important.
Yeah, that's a great question. The ESG report or sustainability reporting is the ultimate tool where every company is disclosing their performance on environmental, social, and governance criteria. And at the same time, is the best tool for the companies to influence investors
Hmm.
and influence the ESG ratings. So the more appropriate content they have into the reporting, the more likely is that these companies they're going to get positive ratings and they're going to be preferred by the investors. So the ESG reporting is the ultimate tool for the companies to influence their ESG ratings and have a more and be more credible to the investors, to the eyes of investors.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of times when investors are looking at the 10K, as well as far as what their performance is and their liabilities,
Mhm.
but I think there's more of this additional drill down into the ESG report to get a better feel for their overall performance on the environmental side, right?
Yes, exactly. And there are many other benefits of sustainability report. Let me share some of them. It helps companies to commit and set measurable goals and they're public goals. So if you publicize that, then you have to meet them. It's very important commitment,
Yeah.
as we all know. It helps, we have seen from our experience working with several global Fortune 500 firms that it helped to measure their performance and manage change. And as we know, sustainability is helping organizations to be transformed into a more sustainable business
Mhm.
from what they are right now. And the most important fact I have seen all these years, and I think very few people, unfortunately, or thought leaders have underlined that, is that 80% of the value of the company today are the intangible assets. Reporting is the disclosing of the performance of every company on these intangible assets, which represents the 80% of the value. So a sustainability report reflects today the future of the company and how this company is going to be sustainable much better than a traditional financial report. And that's why sustainability report is required in many places around the globe as part of the legislation. For example, in Europe, is mandatory for several large business in every European country, but also in many other countries around the globe.
Mm. Well, you're right, and there are some recent changes coming forward in the U.S. We'll talk about that here in a little bit as well. But I think SEC is getting ready to propose some new rules, so that'll be interesting. We'll dive into that. Well, this has been a kind of a pretty good overview on the impact or the importance of ESG reporting, and I got to imagine part of this conversation as relates to reporting is around tracking and managing this data, because we're kind of talking about the reporting component, which is very important, right? You got to summarize all this information.
Mhm.
The importance of how do you track this information? What's important to, how to manage this appropriately from a business operation level. I'm kind of curious how, how companies are, separating all this information out at a granular level, so it does a nice little report from the bottom up to the top. I mean, other software platforms, I mean, are people doing this by spreadsheets? I mean, what's the typical way this is happening?
Yeah, they started with spreadsheets and then they realized that it's not going to be enough. So they're going to need software. But most importantly, they need qualified professionals, either hire them or educate them internally in
Uh-huh.
order to gather the right data and then disclose the right data through the compliance to particular standards. We have ESG standards, of course, for reporting. Report is not something that you can do in any way you want. As in financial reporting, we have standards that the companies have to comply, like SASB standards or GRI standards, which are the leading standards in the globe that help companies standardize the way that this data are being reported or disclosed. So there's a lot of job internally. So global companies have big teams, global teams that they gather this data. And of course, you need software, you need appropriate software in order to collect the data, analyze the data, and report the data.
Yeah, no, that's great. Well, this has been a good intro into our first segment. I'd like to take a moment now to let's dive into our second segment of today. We're going to cover the role of the chief sustainability manager and the high demand for sustainability professionals in the industry. Let's dive into this. So, CSE has trained over 8,000 certified sustainability practitioners globally. And you guys are analyzing and periodically managing and updating the standards and knowing what's going on, because you need to put your training materials together to meet these standards. So let's talk about the increasing demand for sustainability professionals in an organization.
Absolutely. We are very proud, as I mentioned in the very early beginning, to have trained and qualified 8,000 sustainability practitioners from 90 countries that they represent 90, almost 94 today of Fortune 500 firms
Uh-huh.
and several governmental and other agencies. So we're very happy about that because, again, we get started 15 years ago. So we were the first in this field. And it was easier for us at that time to provide the need of the qualification of these professionals. Of course, today we're talking about booming of the sustainability profession in general or ESG profession in general. According to ILO, there are going to be at least millions of jobs by 2030 needed related to sustainability.
Wow.
So it seems that sustainability profession is booming as we speak. And this is the reason that I'm teaching in UIC in Chicago, and we have created sustainability related programs to help the new generation to be ready for helping business to transit from the older business model, as I call it, to a more sustainable model. So the role of sustainability professional is key today. There are thousands of organizations that they have vice presidents for sustainability or ESG directors, or even ESG or sustainability committees that they are leading
Uh-huh.
the sustainability transformation within the business. And it's really one of the most hot professions right now.
Right. I mean, it is one of the hottest career jobs out there. I mean, I see a lot of job postings on LinkedIn and other platforms. And I think a lot of the environmental professionals that are currently in the industry, it's going to be an easy transition for most of those professionals into a sustainability role because probably for the most part, they've been doing some component of sustainability in their environmental, jobs descriptions. They just hasn't been kind of characterized as such, right?
Yes and no. Yes, because for some of them, the transition is going to be more easy. Those that have worked at the operational level or at the environmental level, it's going to be easier.
Uh-huh.
But ESG is becoming extremely sophisticated today. We have 10 new standards every year and new ratings every year. So everything you knew 2 years ago,
Got to relearn again.
you need to completely renew almost every year. So while it's helpful, your background, you still need to have a revised education every year with several new courses related to the new standards you should be aware in order to help your organization, your company to comply and then have good ESG performance from the rating agencies. So
Well,
it's not easy, it's challenging for them. And that's why now companies have big teams, but everybody has a different specialization. It's impossible one person to be
right.
specialist in everything.
No, yeah, absolutely. And it is more complex. Talk a little bit about CSE's training opportunities for professionals who want to learn and get a certification to help, advance their career. Talk a little bit about that because I think that's kind of important. I mean, you guys have trained 8,000 plus, sustainability practitioners. How does that work? And how, what type of courses are you offering?
Yes. First of all, we don't only train practitioners, which means professionals or vice presidents or executives, but also we train board of directors. So there are several cases that CSE has many different levels of training. We have the training where we qualified the professionals in order to play the role of sustainability manager or CSO or Chief Sustainability Manager or ESG Director. So this is one kind of training. Then we have specialized trainings for these professionals. So if we want to go more in depth on a particular topic, for example, carbon emissions metrics or circular economy, so they have the opportunity to pick up specialized in-depth courses. And then we have in-house trainings, the group trainings, which are customized to the needs of each company. And in this case, we start with the board of directors, then we move on to C-suite executives, and then the third level is managers of the company. And the good thing is that we have several companies, especially from Silicon Valley, but also from other places, that they starting understanding the need of the education of all their staff.
Uh-huh.
So
Uh-huh.
the new trend is that not only train directors or managers, but also engage with all your staff and train all your staff. And they understand that it's very important for their transformation to a sustainable business.
Gotcha. Okay. Good to know. Good to know. Well, what is the latest trends in sustainability reporting, including the standards used? Are there any key differences between Europe and the US or
Mhm.
Canada? I mean, talk about that a little
Yes.
bit.
Yes, we're very happy to share the latest research of our. Every year we do research on ESG, and we involved about 1,500 companies from US and Canada.
Okay.
In the latest research we did at the end of 2021, we find out that the ESG leaders, it means the companies with the highest ratings in 16 sectors, have some common characteristics. And that was fascinating. So there is a methodology that more or less all of these companies follow in order to have best performance and therefore better financial results than the other companies. And let me share that with you. The first one is that they have very ambitious ESG goals. For example, the most of them, they want to be net zero
Uh-huh.
in terms of carbon emissions by 2025 or 2030.
Uh-huh.
I'm just giving an example of a goal.
Uh-huh.
Most of them, they meet particular comply with particular ESG standards like the GRI, SASB, and TCFD guidelines, which are heavily specialized to ESG criteria. And all of them, they do on an annual basis and stakeholder survey, and they're trying to identify what are the key concerns of the stakeholders, including investors, clients, employees, suppliers, and so on.
Mhm.
These are common, I would say, practices from the ESG top 50 leaders, according to our research findings.
So if you're a company and you're a global company, you're operating in multi countries. The key there is now you have to understand the different regulations in all the countries you operate in. Have you seen some companies take more of a hey, we're going to use this more stringent standard or common standard than focusing specifically on just a local requirement, or does it
Yes.
make
So,
sense?
so for a global business, it's challenging because we need to comply with different legislations around the globe.
Hmm.
The highest legislations right now we have seen is in Europe and Canada. So if any company is a global company, for example, PepsiCo, which is operating, I don't know, in 100 countries or more, and they meet the European or Canadian legislation, this means that they don't have to comply with any other legislation because this is
Okay,
already
the toughest
the,
one to meet.
the top legislation. And this is usually the common practice. They was trying to comply with this kind of legislation. Although the tricky thing here is that this legislation is changing every year. So when we're talking about compliance, 10 years ago, it was an easy thing to do. There was not so many legislations around sustainability. Today. It's a moving target, which
Right.
means that you need to have a whole team only to help organization comply with any upcoming legislation.
Yeah, no, I guess that's right. I mean, you need a lot of different stakeholders taking note of what's going on in the regions that they're working in. So, well, what's the role in the future of sustainability professionals? I mean, will it be important for
Mhm.
sustainability professionals to attain their credential and demonstrate their knowledge and credibility? To deal with these ever changing requirements.
Yes, and that's why we need to attend courses on an annual basis and also be able to find out about the requirements of upcoming legislation. Again, according to ILO estimates the creation of 24 million jobs related to green economy, which means related to sustainability by 2030 alone. So 24 million,
That's a
it's a
lot.
lot, it's a lot of jobs.
Yeah, yeah. I'm surprised. Are you sensing that universities are starting to develop and prepare for sustainability degrees coming out of college in this area?
Absolutely. Absolutely. In DePaul University in Chicago, where I was teaching for several years, we had developed a master degree, one of the first master degree in the country about sustainable management. But today, I would say all leading universities have either master degrees on sustainability or MBA programs with sustainability concentration or bachelor degrees with the inclusion of sustainability related courses. So I would say that, and I'm very happy about that because back in 2014, we wrote a book, Practical Sustainability Strategies. And the objective of that book at that time was to help universities have the right books in order to help students acquire the right knowledge, practical and up-to-date knowledge for
Go,
their
mm,
career path.
Going into the field. Yeah, right. No, that's fantastic. That's great. Well, what's your take on the industry trend right now of top executives and their compensation tied to ESG performance?
Right. Yes, we have a new trend. We are in the very, very early beginning of this trend. Very few organizations have created bonus schemes that are related to the ESG ratings of the companies. So the higher the rating of the company, then the better the bonus. And this is great. I mean, this is, again, we are
Oh,
in the very early beginning of
this
this
is
type of process.
transformational, to be honest with you. I
Yeah,
mean, when I think of it, this just has just come out about like in the past year and a half, really about a year and a half.
yeah.
Compensation was always tied to performance or production or
Mhm.
how much profit. But no, now performance is going to be tied to how well they're doing with their ESG performance and reducing greenhouse gas. That is a game changer.
It is. Of course, profit, it's still there, right?
Right.
But
No, that's like an element, but it's not the leading one anymore, it seems like.
yeah, I mean, ESG is becoming a very important element about the future of a company and about investors. So investors and financial institutes, they're going to invest in companies that they have limited risks.
Yeah.
So we're going to see industries like fossil fuels industries or any kind of older, we call it industries, that they're not, we're going to be struggling in finding investors or get financed by the financial system in the next 2 or 3 years. So it's not going to be easy for them to survive. And that's why the corporations, they need to do this transformation, is this transformation now, because world is changing fast.
Yeah. Right. No, I agree. Investors are demanding more clarity, more visibility on performance from an ESG perspective from these companies they want to invest in, and because it's near and dear to their heart, and they care about the environment, and of
Mhm.
course they care about making money too, but more so on doing good for the best. Right. So, well, this has been a good segment. We're going to take a second here now, and we're going to jump into our third segment, which is what are the new standards and legislation in the US and Europe that will have high impact on businesses? So, what can be expected from the US after the SEC, the Security and Exchange Commission, launched their new major outreach to businesses in March of 2021? And just recently, they have just released their proposed climate disclosure rule. Let's talk about that, Nikos.
Yes, we're very happy to close that. We helped SEC in the consultation process last May. It was in May 2021. And of course, we were very excited about that. And we're very happy about this legislation. This legislation requires from business to disclose information related to climate risks.
Mm-hmm.
Climate change is happening, as we all know. Climate change, as COVID, create disruptions to supply chains, to the whole economy. And the whole philosophy of the legislation is that if organizations are well prepared to report how well prepared they are about climate related risks.
Right.
And therefore, indirectly, it gives a very important signal. And the signal is that get prepared and create the appropriate infrastructure and diversity of resources in order to be able to be a sustainable business and avoid interruptions from climate change related phenomena.
Yeah. So when I was reading the new proposed rule, there are requirements now to have a plan in place to address their basically what's their resiliency plan to address climate change effects to their business. So like how are they planning to do that? And then it also was really reporting all of their disclosures from indirect and direct greenhouse gas impacts to their business and tracking all those. That's a lot to ask for companies. It's going to be a requirement now that's going to be a standard, which I think is going to really unify the way everybody is being evaluated in the industry from an ESG perspective. I think there's a lot of benefit to having everyone playing on the same sheet of music and same standards. And I think that'll be really good.
Yeah, we are in the era of decarbonization of the business. And as I mentioned, several businesses want to become net zero by 2030. This is an ultimate goal. We have introduction of initiatives such as the Science-Based Targets Initiative that help organizations to make the right commitments towards carbon reduction or becoming net zero. And this is going to be challenging. This is going to be a challenge for most of the business. But of course, they know that. They know that they have to do that at the same time, and there's no way out. So there's a lot of pressure from legislation, from investors, but also they know what they have to do it. So right now, there's a lot of internal discussions within board meetings, C-suite executive meetings on what are the appropriate plans in order to reduce significantly carbon emissions, not only within their operations, but also within their supply chain. This is
Mm-hmm.
where we are right now. And I believe by 2025, in almost 3 years from now, we're going to see hopefully significant progress towards this direction.
Yeah, I
Again,
mean,
legislation and investors are the key drivers right now.
right. No, I totally yeah, I agree. And the requirements for capturing these, scope 1, scope 2, scope 3 type emissions is, from the supply chain, understanding, from your suppliers, their carbon impact to the products you're purchasing from that's going to a whole nother level that a lot of companies aren't doing right now. And that's going to take a lot of effort from a contract procurement perspective. Like, who am I going to buy these products from? And now I need to assess, their carbon impact to the purchases I make. I mean, this is going to really be a lot more complicated, and it's going to require a lot more infrastructure from companies to put these things in place. Wouldn't you agree?
Yes, this is going to be super complicated, especially for small, medium business that are the suppliers or part of the supply chain of larger business. This kind of smaller business, they're going to get a lot of pressure and they need to adapt immediately. Otherwise, they're going to lose their clients. So we're going to lose a big portion of their revenue. So it's essential for them. This is the new way, a new wave of sustainability, as we call it, which is moving now to B2B, business to business, small, medium enterprises, which are part of a bigger supply chain.
Mm, right, right. Well, what role does the European Commission, the European Green Deal, or the European Taxonomy play in the quality of sustainability reporting? Because you
Yeah.
know that's it sounds like they're kind of leading the way in the industry, and it's having its effect globally.
Yes, this is one of the toughest legislation in the globe, if not the toughest, most challenging, if I call it demanding, that's the right term. In EU make a commitment to become carbon zero, net zero by 2050, and of course it requires by every country, European country, also to become net zero by 2050. This is a huge transformation for the European economy, obviously, and it's going to affect any business operating in
Right,
any kind of European country, but it's going to affect any American global business operating in Europe at
right,
the same time. So it's going to have a huge impact to any, I would say, American global business, but also small, medium enterprise that they're supplying products or services to European companies at the same time. So we believe that this commitment has going to have a huge impact to the American business. And also there is another new legislation, the EU taxonomy, which is going to classify what kind of investments are going to be considered as sustainable. So the big issue today, especially here in the US, is that anybody could use the term sustainable for any kind of investment. Now EU is going to classify what is going to be considered sustainable investment, and therefore um, what you're allowed, where you are allowed to invest your money. So
hmm
if you are a sustainable investor in Europe or a banking institute in Europe, you're not going to be allowed to invest money in non-sustainable investments. So
okay,
now this legislation, which is extremely critical, is going to classify what is considered sustainable investment. Is it nuclear power is going to be a sustainable investment or not? Is it natural gas is considered sustainable investment or not? These are all these issues that is going to be classified, and this is going to be very important.
that'll be a trend moving forward. I'm sure making its way across to the U.S. At some point. When you think about the B2B downstream type, expectations from, a company purchasing products. I mean, right now, I've seen some recent
Mhm.
product labeling, so to speak, where you're going to buy a product, and at the the bottom of the product, or somewhere on the code, or somewhere on the bag, or whatever you're buying, it's going to give you a greenhouse gas score, right? An impact score on the unit. What that unit impact is to making and producing that product. I mean, are we talking about that level of required reporting to basically summarize the impact that people for the products people are buying? Because if you're going to buy 1,000 units of those things, you could just take that number times 1,000. You're going to know what your score is, and what your down indirect costs are, right? Or indirect
Yes,
gas emission are.
absolutely. So far we are in the process of corporate reporting and classification, and we're moving slower to the product
Yeah.
reporting and classification. We're not there yet, for sure. Although there are thousands of green labels,
Right.
if you pick up any product, you're going to find at least 3 or 4 per product. This is not necessarily classification. Classification, as you very correct mentioned, is a score within a unified and accepted system of
Mm.
ESG. We are not there yet. We are moving towards this direction. And I believe in 4 or 5 years from now, we're going to be there, but not yet.
So there's going to be a lot of room there between now and say 4 or 5 years from now, because if the requirements are from a disclosure perspective, say of the SEC, to require your downstream indirect greenhouse gas emission costs from raw materials, they're gonna make these people, the suppliers, pay for that. Or, I mean, basically provide that information, right?
Yes. And
Yeah.
then we need to have the consumers engagement. Of course, the consumers need to have the right information. And, we're moving to a different era of communication to the consumers. And this is very challenging for the consumers, especially for middle, lower class, because we have a lot of evidence that the middle, upper class are more sophisticated when they buy green products. Also, millennials as well, they're more sophisticated, but then other part of the consumers are not as sophisticated as we wanted in order to prefer more sustainable products than the others.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what kind of standards are going to be set up, or at least some guidelines to, providing that score or that rating, of some sort, for these material suppliers of products. It'll be interesting to see how that evolves over time.
Yes, obviously the business do not want that to happen, right?
Yeah, now they got to basically hire sustainability professionals to help calculate this. So more of those hundred.
They hate comparisons of products. They completely hate that.
Yeah, it's another one of those jobs in the 24 million that are going to be created in the next couple of years, right?
Right.
Well, I'm seeing a trend in many large companies, such as like Siemens, launching decarbonization programs to help
Mhm.
fund small and medium enterprises. This SME type concept with consulting services and capital and key technologies. What do you see trends there? I mean, it sounds like there's a
Mhm.
lot of these other companies wanting to create services and tools to help people do it, since they're already kind of ahead of the game.
Yes, you're talking about companies or consulting firms.
Well, companies like Siemens is launching a
Okay.
whole decarbonization
Right.
program. I don't typically think of Siemens as a consulting company. I think them as a manufacturer of products,
For
but
sure.
they're obviously offering consulting services now.
Yes. Look, I mean, what happened is that they all big business, especially the big accounting firms that they're specialized in accounting, obviously, they saw big opportunities in carbon emissions reduction,
Yeah.
and they either invest in creating new technologies or tools or whatever other initiatives in order to help business towards decarbonization programs. This is going to be challenging process for special industries like airlines. How we're going to
Oh,
decarbonize airlines?
yeah, I know
How
that
you
one.
going to decarbonize the shipping industry, which are moving? I don't know. It's moving the world
Right, right,
where the technology is not there yet.
right, right.
So we're
And
talking decarbonization, but in some sectors like airlines and shipping industry, the technology for helping them to do that is not ready.
Yeah, they're going to need to partner with companies who can help basically develop customized programs for them. And
We
yeah,
need new technology. No, if we have
yeah,
to be honest, we need a lot of investment in R&D in order to create new technologies which are going to be available for airliners like Boeing and Airbus and shipping
yeah.
companies in order to do this transformation. I mean, both industries are responsible for, I believe, almost 40% of the global emissions. So if they don't do that, how are we going to reduce our emissions?
Yeah, I know. There's a lot of focus on sustainable aviation fuel right now, which is great. That's a good step. And there's a lot of other requirements for companies to airline companies to really help improve their sustainability programs. And I'm aware of
Mhm.
a few. And so it's a big topic right now for a lot of these companies. Well, there seems to be a lot of focus on scope 3 emissions from business travel
Mhm.
and from companies, in the supply chain. How difficult is it going to be moving forward to really, change the way we've been doing business? We've been touching on this with this scope 3 down gradient stuff, but how hard is this going to be for business to really manage?
Yes, let me clarify for the audience that scope 3 emissions are emissions that are indirect to their business, and it has to do with business traveling, with employees' commute, but mostly with their supply chain. And the supply chain is by far most of the emissions in every business. So for business traveling, the good news is that it's very easy to capture your carbon footprint there. So there are different carbon offsetting programs where you can offset your carbon emissions through business traveling, but also you can reduce business traveling. Today, with COVID, most of the meetings are taking place through Zoom or WebEx
Yep.
platforms, also a lot of conferences. So I don't believe it's going to be a very big challenge. The big challenge is going to be on the supply chain because we're talking about hundreds of business in every supply chain involved in all around the globe, but all these businesses are operating all around the globe, and this is not going to be easy. So we're going to see a lot of pressure from the corporations to supply uh, to the companies in their supply chain also to become net zero. So the
Right.
next wave
Right.
is the supply chain of the companies to become net zero.
This is kind of reminiscent of, say, the safety culture in the industry. So, companies really started to push on their third party vendors to really be safe companies, right? Because if they hire them, they can't bring them on their sites and have safety incidences and things like that. So there was always a flow down of expectations of safe practices. I see this as a very similar process with ESG. It's like it's going to be a flow down to their suppliers to demonstrate they have a really good sustainability program, and also they know what the emissions are from the purchasing of these products for and good services from them. um, and I see that there's probably an opportunity that if I'm a business guy at a company, I'm going to be really evaluating my contracts with my third party suppliers to weave in language in my contract that's going to require these companies to provide sustainability metrics and ESG information, so it's tied to their contract. I think that's the easiest way to get this information right off the bat. What do you think?
Yes, but you need criteria that needs to
Yeah.
be set to these companies. These companies they need to upload information and that they meet the criteria. So you need some kind of assessment,
Yeah.
and in some cases an audit. Because don't forget, most of the sustainability related scandals or about ethical behavior was taking place in the supply chain and in the developing world where
Hmm.
there's not a lot of legislation there.
I was reading in an article that came out just recently on the SEC, but they said that basically they're estimating that excluding indirect emissions from companies is about 75% of the greenhouse gas emissions that companies are contributing to. So that's a huge number by not having this information from your suppliers.
And some cases is up to 90%.
Wow. So right, right. So Wow. So really, this need to get your indirect greenhouse gas emissions from your suppliers is going to be so important over the next few years.
Absolutely. So far, we have commitments for companies to become net zero for scope 1 and 2 emissions, but not necessarily for scope
Scope
3,
three.
which is obviously it's challenging.
Wow. Wow. Well, look, Nikos, we've covered a lot of great topics today. We've had three segments that have been really uh, put together to kind of break down some of this information. This has been a really good episode. I'm looking forward to bringing you back on in about another couple months. We'll get into some more details on within the sustainability sphere of practice. I really appreciate you for coming on the show today, and if anybody's listening and want to get a hold of you, how do we get a hold of you?
Thank you so much, Sean. Appreciate that.
Yeah, well, we'll put some information on the website so we can get some people to reach out to you. I appreciate it, and thanks for coming on the show today.
Thank you so much, Sean.